Hello and welcome to this episode of the REBT Advocates with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein of 3minutetherapy.com. You can find his book, 3-Minute Therapy, Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life at therebt.life, links below. And myself, I'm Tommy Bateman. I'm a licensed counselor in Richmond, Virginia. You can contact us both at rebtadvocates@gmail.com. Send us your hate, your love, your comments, your questions. And in fact, one of those types of questions made its way to this episode today. And we have brought someone on with us to discuss mindfulness and REBT. Michael, before we get started, what do you have to say?
I want to introduce myself and then I'll introduce my guest. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein. I'm a licensed psychologist all over the world now with remote therapy. I have 40 years experience helping people with REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy, devised by Albert Ellis and the subject of all our episodes. You can find my practice link and 3-Minute Therapy link in the description below. We're very fortunate to have a guest today, Niraj Nanal. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Niraj?
Yeah, it's Nanal.
Nanal. Niraj Nanal. He's a student of REBT and very well versed in it. And he's a certified financial planner in India. The subject is mindfulness. So, Niraj, would you start off by defining mindfulness?
Yeah, definitely. So, mindfulness is a practice where you reflect and where you witness your thoughts without any judgment and without any biases. So it's a practice of reflection where you watch your thoughts, you don't react, and it's a continuous process which will help you to basically address the disturbed thoughts in a passive kind of way. And therefore I want to know your view in terms of how REBT look at the mindfulness practice. So that's the first question which I have.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're addressing this because I know when we've talked about DBT, ACT, and even when our most recent episode about living in the present, we've gotten a lot of questions about mindfulness meditation and how it relates to REBT. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, and what is it, just an understanding mindfulness before we get into the weeds? What is the objective of mindfulness?
Yeah, come again. I think I missed it.
What is the objective of mindfulness?
Yeah, so the objective is basically getting beyond your disturbed emotions. So that's one of the goal of mindfulness. And to give you an example, let's say you have an anxious thought. If you are talking about anxiety, and then you have an anxious thought, and normally what happens is after that anxious thoughts, you start experiencing that, and you start resisting that, and you get into the loop of thinking about thinking, what in REBT called as secondary disturbance. And that resistance, that effort to get rid of anxiety sometimes becomes a bigger anxiety than the actual anxiety itself. And that is where the mindfulness pitches in, where it wants you to just let go and see the thoughts without judgment. So that is the crux of the mindfulness. So I would like to know from you, Michael, what you think in terms of addressing your neurosis through this kind of a passive way.
Well, it seems like it's what's called throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because we do have goals and values and preferences. And in order to achieve those preferences, it means looking at what we're doing that helps us achieve our preferences. In other words, we make a judgment. What I'm doing is positive, helpful, adaptive, and we continue. Or what I'm doing is maladaptive or unhelpful, so I try to stop. So if we throw out judgment with mindfulness, then it seems like nothing is really left in terms of passion, positivity, and happiness in our life. Happiness comes from positive judgments.
Yeah, but many times if you see, the thinking about thinking is the bigger problem. In fact, REBT addresses the same in with regard to secondary disturbance. So we have anxiety, and then we have anxiety about anxiety. So many times there is a lot of effort going on, effort in terms of to get rid of those negative emotions. But in mindfulness, one concept of mindfulness is that you don't resist these emotions. You see these emotions, because whenever there are neurotic emotions you are experiencing, there is a sensation in your body also, which is kind of a trigger, which leads to a spiral where you experience emotions one after another, and there is a loop happening. So the whole idea behind mindfulness is being completely aware of this process of mind instead of getting involved. It's like fumbling the muddy water. The more you fumble, uh, the more it becomes muddy. So sometimes you have to just let go and watch it, and then it settles automatically. So that is where the mindfulness practice comes from. So I would really like to, because one more point is that the mindfulness practice originated from Buddhism, and Buddhism and REBT has so many similarities which were discussed. So I would like to know what you think about the same.
Well, as I said, it seems like it's throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And does mindfulness only focus on secondary disturbance? You're making you're emphasizing that.
Yeah.
It does.
I'm not sure. I'm not really clear about that, but that aspect of mindfulness really connected with me with regard to REBT, because that made a lot of sense with me. And when I was practicing the mindfulness for last couple of years now, it helped me to smoothen, or it helped me to reflect back, and it helped me to settle those secondary disturbance in a very different way, rather than the typical way of disputing it and kind of resisting it, kind of fighting with it. Some may argue that it may not be precise that we are doing fighting in REBT in terms of the thought process. But what I wanted to ask you is that this is another way which is practiced by many psychotherapies now. The ACT emphasizes on that. The whole Eastern tradition is based on this mindfulness practice, the meditation. So what is the view of REBT in that regard?
Yeah, Tommy, did you have an answer to that?
Well, I'm going to spitball one for you. Niraj, according to your description, what we do is when we feel the emotion coming, instead of trying to cognitively dismiss it, we should allow it to come. Don't resist it and observe it. And I hope I've summarized it correctly.
Yeah.
So the goal of REBT is not necessarily to resist the emotion as it's happening. So when I have trained my folks to, when they're emotionally activated, let's say with a trauma response or anxiety, I teach them biological biofeedback, such as holding ice or doing some grounding things, and all that is practical solutions to deactivating those biological responses to anxiety and trauma. I see that as a something you do after you're already activated. It's done. We're not going to REBT our way out of the middle of a panic attack. All we need to do is get through it, focus on breathing, that sort of thing. No, I see mindfulness in the way you described it as a way to calm the emotions down after you've already been activated. However, REBT is focused on preventing the activation to begin with, if you understand.
Yeah, but then in mindfulness, it can be helpful when the emotion is activated. And other argument of mindfulness is, if you keep practice, if you make it as we say in REBT, that the 3-minute exercise, you have to practice it daily. The mindfulness practice also emphasizes the importance of reinforcement. So then what they recommend is meditating daily, which will inculcate the habit to look at your emotions from a distance, which will help not to get involved, and not, so that when you don't get involved with those emotions in a kind of a neurotic way, what happens is it helps you to look at them more objectively, and it doesn't, those emotions may not affect you the way which they affect you normally when you are all the time resisting it or all the time judging them.
Yeah, I see how the two practices complement each other well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Niraj, you brought in meditation. What's the relationship between mindfulness and meditation?
Actually, the both are quite similar. In fact, the meditation has some probably religious connotations. So therefore, I suppose mindfulness is used as a term. But as per my understanding, both are quite similar, if not same.
I see. So meditation, it's my understanding that you take some time out every day on a regular
Yeah,
basis, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to
yeah,
meditate. I
yeah.
thought mindfulness is just spontaneous in the moment. So I thought there was a vast difference between the two.
No, no, they are quite similar. To give you a standard practice of mindfulness is looking at your breathing. So what you do is the quite common practice of mindfulness is where you start looking at your breathing without trying to control it or without trying to breathe in any particular way, is you start observing your breath. Okay, and once you start doing that, the thoughts are going to come. The thoughts are going to one after another, the thoughts are going to come. And what you are supposed to do is you have to acknowledge those thoughts, you look at them, and then again you come back to your breathing. So that's a typical mindfulness practice, which is uh, uh, quite popular and practiced around the globe now.
Yeah,
I
I've
see.
actually taught some folks something similar. I mentioned grounding earlier, which is a way to get yourself out of an emotionally activated state by looking at things around you or feeling things or smelling things or around you in a non-judgmental way. And that means, for example, I'm looking at my wall right now. I could say my wall is gray. I'm not saying it's
Mhm,
an ugly wall. I'm not saying I hate the wall. It's just saying the wall is gray. The light
mhm,
above me is a soft, warm light. There's a red
mhm.
guitar over there. I could feel
Yeah,
my butt in this recliner I'm sitting in right now.
yeah,
In that's way, and that brings you away from the emotional activation and more into an analytical and detached frame of mind. And then I also focus on the breathing. I teach square breathing or combat breathing, which I think I've talked about before. So yeah,
yeah,
excellent.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So one more point which I want to add, or probably both of you can address, is the genesis of mindfulness. What I have understood is that we are all the time, as we are a thinking animal, we are all the time thinking, judging, and all the time in that loop. And many times we are not also aware what we are doing. So maybe eating, maybe walking, maybe doing our regular activities. We kind of do all those activities being unconscious, not in the literal sense of the term, but we are not aware of what we are doing. We are doing those things mechanically. And one aspect of mindfulness is about being aware, being conscious, being alive to each moment. And that is one aspect of mindfulness which is quite stressed. So I would like to know how do you relate to that, and do you think any significance in that?
Yeah, well, that doesn't quite make sense to me that we are all the time judging and thinking in terms of evidence for that.
Mhm,
How would I get evidence? Let's
mhm.
suppose I don't think at a particular point, or looking back on it, I don't think I was judging or thinking. Is there a way to get evidence that I was?
Yeah, so if you reflect back, if you just reflect back, you can see that the mind is always working, and it is always thinking, and the thinking is either about past or about future. So we are very few times we are in the present moment. And I think the present moment is something which I think you discussed it some videos some time back about in that video. So mindfulness stresses the importance of present moment, being in the present moment, being alive in the present moment.
Yeah,
So
Niraj, may I respectfully say, I don't think you answered my question. What's the evidence we are
mhm.
all the time judging and thinking?
So when you look at your when you look at your thinking, when you just reflect back what you are doing in the whole day, for example, you can see that all the time when it's about looking at your thinking. And when you look at your thinking objectively, or become an observer of your thinking, you can easily realize that most of the time, in fact I realized it in myself, that most of the time either I am thinking about future or I am thinking about past. There is a lot of rumination happening. So what do you think? Don't you think this is a common human phenomena?
I do, if you put it more moderately and say a lot of the time we're judging and thinking, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Just in terms of introspecting, a lot of the time I'm thinking or judging. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't see that all the time that's the case. And more importantly, I don't know how you get evidence that all the time it's the case. So what I'm
Mhm.
asking is, what's the evidence that
Yeah,
all the
yeah.
time all people are judging and thinking?
Yeah, so I think semantically, all saying that all the time people are thinking is wrong. But what I can say from my own experience is that most of the time, as a human being, we are thinking either about the past or about the future, and most of the time it is not kind of a, it's more of a rumination, ruminating thought, some brooding happening. May not be happening with all the people, but mindfulness also stresses this fact, that the mind is always thinking either about the past or about the future. And that is one emphasis, one aspect of mindfulness which is stressed by the mindfulness practitioner, which makes sense to me. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that rumination normally is accompanies disturbance. You're ruminating on musts or shoulds, or ruminating on I can't stand it, or I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
But I don't know that people, when they're not feeling anxious, depressed, guilty, angry, are ruminating.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your version of mindfulness overemphasizes um, just constant
Mhm.
disturbed thinking in people's heads. Also, another impression I have about mindfulness is that it is a distraction from your philosophy of musts and shoulds. So
Yeah.
it's second best. So it's good to distract yourself at times. But I
Yeah.
think the more elegant solution is identifying your demands and identifying your irrational beliefs,
Yeah.
questioning, challenging it, and looking for evidence for it, and
Mhm.
ultimately contradicting it to as a practice to give up disturbed and maladaptive thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Niraj, I have a
So
question about that actually.
yeah.
So, mindfulness helps bring us and become more aware of perhaps even what we're thinking in the present moment. Um,
Yeah.
have you found it to be helpful in identifying your musts to begin with?
Yeah, it may not, because it doesn't have a thrust on analyzing anything. It's the practice recommends that you don't judge any thought, or you don't get involved in any thought. You just observe it, you acknowledge it, and you come back to the present moment. In the normal practice, you come back to your breathing. So
Interesting.
that's the emphasis of mindfulness. So in terms of identifying the must, I don't think mindfulness recommends doing that, because then it says that you are getting involved in the thinking part too much. That's
I
what
see.
I have understood, and this is a question to me. So in fact, Michael, what you say makes sense to me, that changing the philosophy is the elegant solution, but sometimes it is very difficult. So, can we just discount mindfulness just as a part of distraction, or it is becoming the main theme of many of the psychotherapies like CBT or ACT?
Well, I think it's more popular these days among CBT
Mm-hmm.
therapists.
It is.
Yeah.
So, so I think that that's it's
Mm-hmm.
been attractive to these therapists.
Mm-hmm.
Are there times during the day? Are there times to do mindfulness and times not to do mindfulness? Mindful
Yeah. So
thinking or
the
non-mindful thinking?
Yeah, so the idea what I have understood is as I shared with you that I was doing this meditation practice through this app, is that it is recommended that you do it daily and probably in the morning time. And the whole idea is if you do that for a 20 minutes, that is just the starting point. You have to inculcate that practice in your day-to-day life, which means being more aware, being in the present moment. That doesn't mean that you don't think about the future or don't think about the past, but it emphasizes the importance of living the present moment. So let's take an example of eating. So while eating also, many times we are not fully involved in the eating process. We are all the time thinking while we are eating. So one aspect of mindfulness is how can you eat mindfully, where you are completely focused on eating. So that's the crux which I have understood.
I see. Now, would you agree that also it's important to think about the future? There's planning for the future. There's looking forward to
Yeah,
something that's going to happen in the future.
yeah,
There's thinking of ways to do better in the future than
yeah.
I've done in the past. So thinking about the future is important. Would you agree?
Yeah. So what I have understood is that mindful doesn't discourage that. It's more about the judgmental thoughts and the neurotic thoughts which comes into mind, that needs to be discouraged, not by resistance, but by observing them and letting them go.
Right. Now, why not, instead of throwing out all judgment, not only it's awful or terrible, but it's bad or it's very bad. And
Yeah.
rather than throwing out all judgment, why not keep the judgment of what may be bad or good while
Yeah.
throwing out the overgeneralized judgment of it's awful or I'm a bad person
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
I can't stand this
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah. So actually that makes sense. So that is my point of confusion, because what you are trying to convey, what I have understood, just I'm just trying to summarize this, that in fact Ellis also talked on the similar lines, that according to him also, meditation was kind of a distraction, and it can be used, but it was an inelegant solution, and the elegant solution is about changing the philosophy. So that is a point of confusion. Probably Tommy and you can throw some light on that. What do you think about it?
Well, I agree that it's an inelegant solution. It's a distraction. It has its certainly it has its good points, as you're indicating,
Yeah,
but it's I don't think it's really based on changing someone's philosophy and how to get there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I do see mindfulness as useful. Um,
Uh-huh.
I see it as useful when we are emotionally activated and need to back away from that.
Mm,
However, I think the real work occurs when we challenge those musts and those shoulds. But that's why I'm an REBT advocate, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But we
yeah,
are running out of time. Niraj, where can we find more information about mindfulness meditation?
yeah. So I think Headspace is right now the most popular application, which is used by I think millions of people now
How do you
to
spell that, Niraj?
uh, HEAD, head space SPACE.
HEAB, B as in boy.
HEAD. In fact, I will just share the link with you, and probably you can put it in the description box. It's Headspace. Will that be okay if I share the link with you?
Tommy, would you be able to put it below the video? I mean, below the episode?
Yeah, I was saying go ahead and email it to me to a muted microphone.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Very good.
So let's take
Okay.
it away, Michael. Niraj,
yeah.
thank you so much for coming on. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Niraj Nanal,
Yeah, it was
for
pleasure.
joining us and having this discussion about meditation. I think a lot of issues came to light. And if you did enjoy listening to this episode, please give us a like below and comment. Suggest subjects that you'd like us to discuss. This was a subject suggested by Niraj, for which we're grateful. Volunteer to be on with us, as Niraj has done, and we could discuss issues with you or problems, emotional problems of yours, and help you with that. And to please help support us by donating to Patreon, getting the word out, subscribe to the REBT Advocates to stay on the rational side of life.